Hello. Right. I've been promising Emotional Maple a video about art journaling forever, and I finally moved house, sorted out a camera setup that kind of works enough to do this. Sorry about the camera wobbling, it's not the most secure. Anyway, this is my box of journals that I packed. These are all the journals that I've completed. Ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah, there's literally loads of them. I'm probably not going to show you all of them, just because it would take forever. But I wanted to just show you the kind of thing that I did. This is probably my first journal. It's hard for me to see the camera. Yeah, you can see. Right, let's swing it around a bit. This was the first one I started when I did therapy. So my inspiration, excuse me, I've got a cough. My inspiration was whatever I was talking about in therapy. I'm not going to focus too much on each individual page because it's quite personal to me. But yeah, this was when I was working through some things about being married. I found it quite difficult to adjust to an identity of being a married person. It was complicated. This was about not having a voice. So I just take a feeling and I'll put that down, and then I will just journal about that feeling and explore it a little bit. So in this one, I think I was at work and I felt like I'd been silenced by everything that was going on, and how I felt like I wasn't allowed my own opinion at work, even though I strongly disagreed with some things that were happening. So I went through the different, some of it was like the cognitive errors, like overgeneralizing. Other things was just analysing the way I was thinking, like my thoughts were chaining, so I was scared that I was failing, and then that made me scared that I was vulnerable and things like that. Then I did one about fear. Then I did one about things that I was noticing in myself. So I focused on work, home, family and faith. This one I was talking about anxiety. This one was about someone I was working with who was just lying to me. This one's about my husband. This is a letter to my dad who died, and I just stamped these flowers and coloured them in. A lot of this is like stamping, to be honest. It's not, I don't know, I didn't really start it off to be an art journal, but whatever, it kind of went that way. This was about what I wanted to do in the future. This was about just feeling like I was a cog in someone else's machine, and that my life wasn't my own. So it's a bit about dissociation, really. This one was about somebody I missed. This one is a Bible verse about lies. That it was something I was working through at the time. This was when I was feeling completely overwhelmed, and I believe I used like some kind of stencil and texture paste to get all this texture, and a label maker that says all piling up. I mean, you don't need any fancy supplies, you're just basically pouring out your emotions onto paper, and it's cathartic. This was about me feeling trapped and locked up. This was a day when I was feeling better and finding some space inside for some good feelings, which was nice. This, at the time I didn't realise, but this was me uncovering part of my inner world that became a really important safe place for me, and this was like what was on the floor in that place. This is just me writing about how I feel. I went through a stage in counselling where I had a lot of beliefs come up. This was before I was diagnosed DID. So I wrote down some of my beliefs, like I used to believe my skin was cursed, and I would write down why I thought that. Obviously it's not true, but I didn't know that at the time. This one's about lies. This was a page about anxiety and sometimes the things behind anxiety when you start to explore them. I think I've talked about this before, but I tend to experience my feelings as colours. I kind of imagine them as colours inside. So when I was splashing the colours onto the page, it was about what I was feeling inside. Sometimes also it's really cathartic just to throw stuff on paper. This one was when in counselling, when we were looking at the shoulds. So my counsellor always tells me that feeling like I should do something is not necessarily a reason to do it, and it's like an unrealistic expectation on myself. So I always felt like I should be able to keep my house clean, because that was one of the things my parents used to punish me with. I could never get it clean enough. Being confused, different thoughts. That was a picture. I don't know who drew that. I don't remember doing that, to be honest. Things that make me feel like I can't cope with things. This was a page that Marcy did, but I didn't know it was her at the time. Some of my pages are stuck together. I'm not really sure why. Some parts don't like me to share things, so they write them and then cover them up. I had a lot of inner rules, so I started to write those down and process those. More rules. I had a lot of rules. This was something I was working through about being married. This was a letter to my mum. This was different thoughts I had in my head. Another letter to my mum. A letter to my ex-boyfriend. Tree of core beliefs, which I've talked about before. But these are the ones that I was feeling at the time. Didn't realise though, because didn't know I was DID then. Rejection, feeling stuck. How I felt about work. How I felt about the doctors. How I felt when I was frozen but in flight mode. It was a really strange feeling and made me feel quite uncomfortable. This was when I had a breakdown and was thinking about going back to work, and by this point I was aware of my different parts, so I gave each one a jar and they put their feelings inside the jar and wrote about them so that I had an awareness. And this is just my initial parts that I found. I don't have all of them on there. This is about work, so and potentially going to see a psychiatrist, which I never did because I didn't need to in the end. This was when I found some new parts, and one of them wanted to change what they had in their jars. This was just me working through some Bible stuff. More about going to the psychiatrist, praying for my friends. I'm going quickly because I don't want... Oh, I was having a good day that day, yeah. I'm going quickly because I don't want to share too much, but I just do want to share the kind of things that I was writing about. So this is me working through food. I have a lot of problems with food, so you'll probably see that again. That was me realising that what I do is not who I am and working through that. This is me working through grief. This is me working through, I think it was the trauma self-help guide on 7 Cups. Yeah, I think so. Oh, this is me looking at Alan N. Shaw's, so Dr. Shaw wrote a lot about the attachment of children to their parents. He's a great guy to listen to if you want to understand why you have trouble trusting and forming relationships. And that was me making notes about that. This was my, what I call the thought tornado, and I actually remember this day really, really vividly, which is strange because my memories are quite rubbish in terms of I just not very good at recalling things. But anyway, this one day I remember I had gone to breakfast with my husband and I just felt so overwhelmed by eating the food in the restaurant, and I was writing all my feelings about that, and I drew a picture of what it felt like inside. Well, I don't know what that was. More jars. Oh, this was towards the end of this journal. I started looking at who I am and different aspects of me, and I found the vault inside, which I talked about in my Inner World video. And then I talked about the aspects of my personality. So the only thing that I really felt was consistent in my life was that I knew that I had a sense of faith. So I started with that one, and then I went on to the fact